Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Smith, President of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, and want to welcome you all to today's First Friday discussion as part of our series focusing on transportation and infrastructure. And obviously, this is an issue of the utmost importance, not only for our nation, but specifically for our region. And we were incredibly excited when President Biden chose Pittsburgh to announce the infrastructure investment plan. And we think it speaks volumes to how the president and the White House really think about Pittsburgh as playing a central role in bringing smart, future-focused infrastructure to life. And in many ways, we as a region sit at the nexus of manufacturing, of energy, of tech, of innovation, and we think that we're a perfect region in which the president could announce the vision for his infrastructure plan. I think one example that I think of, as many of you know, I serve on the Allegheny County Airport Authority Board, and one large project specifically that to me embodies that sort of nexus is the new airport, the first post-pandemic airport, and most specifically the notion that there's going to be a microgrid at the airport with 10,000 solar panels and 5 natural gas fired generators that's going to power that new airport solely on its own. And I think that's a perfect example of how Pittsburgh is really sitting at this nexus of infrastructure, of energy, and manufacturing. So we're incredibly excited to have our panel with us today who are going to come at this issue from multiple levels of government and multiple angles in their roles outside of their official positions within government. And I think for us, we asked the key question of, how does our region best compete and win for this investment? And we think that's going to be a critical question for our region moving forward. We certainly want to play a role in convening key stakeholders like we're doing today on that question as well. So before we get started with our speakers, we are incredibly grateful to have Comcast Business as the sponsor for our 2021 First Friday series. And I want to bring to the mic right now Lisa Nolan Birmingham, who is the VP of Governmental and External Affairs for Comcast here in the Pittsburgh region.
Hey, thank you so much, Matt. I'm really excited to be here this morning. As I mentioned earlier before we went live, I would love for this conversation to go on for hours, and I think, in fact, it will. We're going to set up some terrific collaboration within the Chamber and the region to advance these infrastructure investments. Let me just start off by saying that Comcast and Comcast Business are really proud to be a partner in this work. And as Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I think that's what we're going to do. The Pittsburgh region is primed for infrastructure investment. We have assets, both physical and intellectual, the partnerships and the ready to go transformative projects like the airport, the new airport that Matt just talked about, as well as fully built out broadband and 5G capability is going to unlock our future potential in the smart transportation context. We also have world-class universities, including 2 Tier 1 institutions that anchor our innovation ecosystem. The region's also home to physical assets like world-class development sites in Neighborhood 91, Hazelwood Green, and what will be the nation's first post-pandemic airport, as Matt just mentioned. And we've also got a proven history of effective public-private collaboration. Our corporate university partnerships drive innovation and economic competitiveness, and business and labor work together here and are unified in support of a robust infrastructure package. I can see why President Biden chose to come to Pittsburgh. So perhaps most important of all, we have transformative, ready-to-go projects with the power to create tangible, real-world outcomes in the form of new modes of transportation, a low carbon future, and next generation economy, jobs, and investment. So let's get this conversation going. Matt, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And we're just for everyone's information, we're going to jump right into short presentations from our panelists, and then we'll obviously open it up for Q&A, and you can go to the bottom of your screen to submit questions that we will then organize and ask of our panelists. But as I said, everyone I think knows our panelists really well. The county executive, obviously in his role as Allegheny County executive, but importantly in this space as the chair of the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, which is our region metropolitan planning organization, which is, as most of you know, plays a critical and central role in our transportation future. And State Representative Austin Davis, everyone knows the great work that Austin has done in his district. He's a member of the House Transportation and the House Appropriations Committee. So obviously two absolutely critical committees for this issue. And also sits on the board of the Port Authority of Allegheny County, which we've often flagged the importance of public transit investment in a dedicated source of revenue for public transit investment as absolutely critical for this region's economic growth, as well as providing equitable opportunity for all regional residents. And then we're going to lastly hear from Cheryl Moon Sirianni, who is the district executive for PennDOT District 11, which obviously plays a central role from the state end in critical infrastructure. And Cheryl's going to walk us through the current state of affairs as it relates to transportation, and it is going to walk through what I think will be a very illuminating slide deck with some visuals that we've seen before that is really, I think, going to grab your attention. So without further ado, I will turn it over to County Executive Rich Fitzgerald. Rich, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. And also thank you, Lisa, for your help and sponsorship and continued cooperation. Hopefully this is one of the last meetings we do like this without being in person, as we get closer and closer to getting on the other side and getting back to some normalcy. And just real quick announcements. We're almost 750,000 shots in arms here in Allegheny County. We're delighted that Governor Wolf came today to help us open up another vaccination clinic down in the Mon Valley in McKeesport. Representative Davis was also with us during that time. It's getting to such a point that today actually was eligible for 1A, 1B, and 1C for walk-in. You don't even have to have an appointment, but AHN is hosting a clinic today with over 6,000 J&J shots today and tomorrow. And then next week, UPMC doing it. So, if you know people that have been waiting, have been frustrated, boy, today's a day you could really get there. So we know that's so important to get us on the other side of this. But we always have to be thinking about the future, and the future for us to grow economically really does deal with infrastructure, transportation, the needs that the president has laid out, and Governor Wolf has laid out too in the commission he has put together, dealing with infrastructure and dealing with transportation that, quite frankly, has been woefully underfunded, both at the federal and state level over the last number of years. And the challenge for all of us when we do these things is to work together. Our cooperation and collaboration is how we've moved this region forward in positive ways. And it's how we're going to move forward when it comes to the needs with transportation. I like to say if there's two big things for us to grow in the next few years, it's really going to come down to workforce development and transportation and infrastructure. And we've got to invest in these things. And I think that's one of the reasons why President Biden I was very proud that he chose our region to come and make his plan, roll it out publicly last week. And we know politically as well that the role, the road to the White House leads through Western Pennsylvania. So it puts us in a good position on leverage and other things that we can do. It was mentioned about the airport, and the president mentioned the airport in his speech last week. It's going to be the first post-pandemic airport rolling out with modernization, with the new communication, the new public safety, and issues that we're going to be dealing with as we've tried to right-size an airport that was built 30 years ago for an operation that no longer exists, the hub, where an O&D operation. Also moving forward on our BRT. That plan has been funded by the federal government. It's a major transportation initiative that's going to link downtown Pittsburgh and Oakland, the two largest job generators here in the region. But we've got a lot of other issues that we need to deal with. It was mentioned about Hazelwood Green, the Hazelwood Green Bate Street widening and adding the ramps onto the parkway so that you can connect onto 376 that way. It's a major initiative. It's going to take a lot of funding, and we're going to need the partners from the state and federal government. Talk about connecting our friends in the Mon Valley, extending the East Busway, which has become such a major economic generator and transportation hub through East Liberty, through Oakland, through Wilkinsburg. It ends now in Swissville, Rankin. We'd like to extend that out into the Mon Valley, Braddock, North Braddock, East Pittsburgh, on into McKeesport to connect folks in the Mon Valley that have been, haven't seen some of the growth that we've seen in other regions. Was mentioned about broadband. I'm the chair of the 10-county region. Some of our friends in the rural areas in Armstrong, Indiana, Fayette, Greene counties don't have connections. And there's actually, even within the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, certain dead spots that exist. So we've got to invest in connecting folks through the school kids, the businesses, the individuals in these communities so that they are connected through broadband. And we've got to continue to invest in our wet weather projects. Alcosan and the PWSA and our municipal partners with the consent decree that we've been dealing with for over a decade. Congressman Doyle mentions this all the time. Originally, when the EPA came in, the plan was to have the federal government, be partners and the ratepayers be partners. Well, thus far, it's mostly been the ratepayers being partners. So we do need our friends at the federal government to start becoming partners and start to help pay and put the resources in to clean up our rivers and eliminate the overflows that we have during wet weather issues. So there's a lot on the table there. There's a lot for us to be working on. These are some of the major projects. There's also, some of that we all have less major or not as costly projects that we see, things like Route 51, 228 up in Cranberry, 422, other issues that we're dealing with in connections we've got to make. And the other thing that the president didn't mention in Pittsburgh, but he kind of hinted at, and he's going to roll this out, is the social infrastructure that needs to be done. And I think around here, I've really wanted to push pre-K so that we can get our kids ready for school, ready to learn, so that workforce development, which again is a short-term as well as a long-term goal and challenge we've got to meet. If we're going to have these kids and people, the workforce ready to do all these jobs that are coming here and being created here, we've got to have folks ready to meet those needs. So again, it's going to take work and it's going to take revenue, and we've got to be willing to support the infrastructure revenue that's going to happen. I think we could all reach consensus on the fact that we all agree that we want infrastructure improvements around roads, bridges, transportation, transit, water, sewer, broadband, et cetera. Now the question becomes, how do we pay for it? Governor Wolf has laid out a plan where he would like to not use the gas tax. Obviously, that's going to be challenging. So what do we use? Do we use mileage-based? Do we use tolling? Do we use income tax, sales tax? Other revenues that we've seen over the years to be able to do that. I think it's a challenge he would like us to do, he said, by August 1st. So I think, again, we've got to put our heads together and come up with a plan that doesn't hurt any one individual or one entity more than the other. I will also say that Secretary Buttigieg is also, from what I understand, planning a trip here into southwestern Pennsylvania as he makes his tour around the country. I've been on a panel with the secretary talking about some of these projects. I think it was mentioned earlier to deal with green infrastructure as well as the transportation needs that we have when it comes to electrification. Comes our friends at Wabtec that are working on some major initiatives in the rail industry. There's just a lot there and a lot for us to wrap our arms around. So I'm very excited about the opportunity. I'm excited about where we can go. And I know, again, working collaboratively, we can get these things. And to have leaders like Representative Davis, who's on two key committees, but also is in leadership in the House. He's the leadership of the caucus here in Allegheny County among the delegation. So, you know, in his knowledge and his work in Harrisburg will certainly help us. Having partners like Congressman Doyle and Congressman Lamb. Congressman Lamb also serves on the Federal Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So having these key partners will be very helpful, and I'm excited about where we go. And again, with Cheryl, she's just been a tremendous partner, having been the representative for the counties here that she represents, and is the executive of and the engineer of. Has given us a great initiative and help with PennDOT. She understands the needs in this region as well as anybody, and knows some of the things that we need to do. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to having discussion and hearing some of the input from some of the members, and let's continue to work together.
Thanks, Rich. And I'll turn it over to Representative Davis here in a second. But I think, Rich, you hit on the point of this sort of dual necessity of the state of repair, deferred maintenance, as well as unlocking economic potential in the region with a project like the Hazelwood Green to Oakland connection. So thank you for laying all that out so well. Representative Davis, I'll toss it over to you now.
Well, first, thank you, Matt, and thank you to the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce for having me this morning. It's wonderful to be back for our first Friday presentation. I want to thank County Executive Rich Fitzgerald and Cheryl Moon Sirianni for joining me today. This is really an exciting time, and the president is being very bold with not only the American Rescue Package that he and Congress just passed, but with the transportation infrastructure bill we're currently debating right now. It is probably he's probably the greatest in transportation investment since the Roosevelt administration, and quite frankly, it's time. You know, our region has struggled to make infrastructure investments, quite frankly, like the county executive mentioned, because we haven't had the partnership at the federal level. But I was thrilled when President Biden came here to make his announcement right here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County for transportation and infrastructure. And I think that was strategic. That was to send a message that Southwestern Pennsylvania is important, but more so important that working class families and working class communities are important, and we're going to have a strong partner in the White House to help revitalize our communities. I was thrilled to greet him when he came to Pittsburgh. You can clearly tell he's ready to make these investments, and I think it's wonderful. The county executive adequately laid out some of the projects that we need to deal with, from extending the Martin Luther King Busway, but making investments to clean up our water and clean up our air. These are all things that are going to take federal investment that we can't do on our own. Increasing access to broadband. We all seen throughout this pandemic how important the access to the internet is. It really is not a luxury. It's almost a right or a necessity at this point, to make sure our children have every access to learn, making sure our businesses and our adults can continue to function in a virtual society. So I think I am extremely excited about the debate that we're getting ready to embark on. At the state level, we have a number of challenges. We're coming up on a number of transportation fiscal cliffs with Act 89 and Act 44. I know the governor has recently put together his Transportation Funding Commission, which I know County Executive Fitzgerald is a key leader on that commission, and he said he wants to work to phase out the gas tax, which is one of the largest gas taxes, and replace it with other revenue sources. So we're just starting that debate in Harrisburg, but I think it's going to be a robust one. But I think it's critical that the business community play a role in those discussions, because the investments we're going to make in transportation and infrastructure are creating the foundation for what will be strong business growth. As we've seen the city of Pittsburgh revitalize, many other communities haven't shared in in those efforts, and we want to make sure that everybody in our region, from the Mon Valley to the North Hills to the West End, city of Pittsburgh, that everybody's sharing in that growth. And it's really going to take improving those transportation connections to do that. We need to ensure that we're opening up new opportunities for folks to join the workforce, but also new opportunities for businesses who want to relocate here, and businesses that want to grow here. And investments in our transportation infrastructure system are critical to seeing the growth of our economy here as a region. I'm proud to work closely with the county executive and the Port Authority on their efforts. As you know, the Port Authority has undertaken a really robust planning process to really look at what are the long range plans for the Port Authority and mass transit in our region, and what do we want it to look like. They've done some phenomenal work and are being very visionary. But I think one of the things that's critical to any of those plans is that we at the state level and at the federal level have to make major investments in our mass transit system. The county executive hit on it. I think we are really in a prime position because of the partnerships we have at the federal level with Congressman Doyle on the Energy and Commerce Committee and Congressman Lamb on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the county executive leading us at SPC. We have a number of members in our state legislative delegation who serve on the House Transportation Committee. So we are really in a position to help drive this conversation. So I think as a region, we have to really make sure that we're working together to elevate our voices to make sure we are getting the investments that our region so richly deserves. You know, I represent the Mon Valley communities, and this week yesterday I did an op-ed in the Tribune Review with some of my colleagues that represent other portions of the Mon Valley, talking about how we can transform our region, and transportation infrastructure investment is absolutely critical to it. If we really want to build back better, as the president says, we have to focus on some of these underserved, long underserved and under-resourced communities, because if you think about Mon Valley communities, there are 1,000 acres of brownfield lands that are undeveloped, that are prime for development. So as we develop Hazelwood Green and continue to move towards the Mon Valley, we're gonna open up many new opportunities for business and growth with investments in transportation. So with that, I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm looking forward to the questions and the conversation. And I just want to thank Matt and the Chamber of Commerce and the Allegheny Conference for putting this together. And I look forward to Cheryl's going to give us a great presentation, I know, and I'm sure it's going to make all of us feel good about our transportation challenges here in the region. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Representative. And we've always, greatly appreciated the partnership with you and your team, and from day one during your service in the legislature, just been a tremendous ally and partner for us. And as Rich said, that partnership is absolutely critical for our regional, past successes we've had here, but most importantly for future successes that we want to have here. So we appreciate it. Cheryl, I'm going to toss it over to you, and I know, but I think both Rich and Representative Davis have seen this presentation, so I think they know what's coming, but I'll turn it over to you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to the kind words from County Executive and the Representative. I honestly couldn't ask for two more supportive gentlemen to be in our corner. They've been so supportive, and having a representative on the Transportation Committee is just more help to all of us, someone with a passion for transportation like that. And while I have such a nice audience here, I would be remiss if I didn't take a couple of seconds to thank everybody that has helped us, the Transportation Department, this past year. I know there's some consultants on the line. I know there's some Rich Barkowski from Constructors Association. We had a very successful 2020, considering everything that had happened. Those folks only got a month and a half break, and they were right back out in construction. They were modifying their business practices, creating safety plans that never existed before, and their folks were out in the front lines all last summer getting a lot of good work done. So along with the consultants out there doing inspection and still putting bid packages forth. So I really have to take this opportunity to thank all of them for their efforts. We can't do it without our great partners. So moving forward, the good news is we are letting, for those of you that don't know, means going out to bid with about 50 projects this year worth about $240 million, which sounds great. The problem is we were supposed to have about $80 million more going out to bid this year. And due to the COVID revenue issues we're dealing with, those projects are going to be pushed to future years, which the domino effect, that just goes to further future years. In addition, we also have an impact to our TIP, our Transportation Improvement Plan this year, where We lost about 200 million over the next 4 years that are going more to the statewide interstate pot because there just isn't enough money to go around. So we're dealing with a significant hit. And I apologize, Representative Davis, because you said I'm going to talk about some good. Well, there's some good, but there's also some challenges. So go ahead, advance the slide, please. This is a slide, and it's dated 2019, but it really hasn't changed. I checked with our folks yesterday. If you look down, we definitely statewide, we have about an $8.5 billion deficit to complete the work that we'd like to do. If you look up onto the slide here, you can see that our unfunded needs just on the roadway alone is about $418 million over a 4-year period. And the bridges are about 550 million. So with that being said, that's just in District 11 alone is how much we need to keep our roads in the condition that we'd like them to be in. The problem is, if you look to the bottom right, is if you don't invest the money in a timely fashion, it's going to continue to cost you more, because a road that could be paved this year, if you wait 5-10 years and you don't have the money, then it turns into a reconstruction project, and it's probably 5 to 8 times more to reconstruct it than it is to pave it. So it's really important to invest the dollars on these roads and bridges when the right time is to do the repairs. So you can save millions and millions of dollars that way. Go ahead. So these are some of the tough decisions, and I know some of you saw this presentation last winter. These are the toughest choices we're making right now. Losing that $200 million off the tip, and then it was additional 80. We can't pave roads on the cycle that we're supposed to. So we're probably 5 to 7 years from paving projects when we're supposed to. So we're dealing with roads like this. Now, if you look, this is a 2023. I'm looking to 2023. Which one of these 2 roads can we afford to pave? Both of them are critical arteries in our region in Allegheny County. Look at the condition of them today. That they have to last 2 more years, and then I'm only going to be able to do 1. So those are some of the big decisions that we're having to make that are very tough. We're trying to hold them together as best as we can. Out in Beaver County on a road like 51, we're doing what's called a microsurface, which is kind of a Band-Aid to try to hold something together until we get money to pave. And those type of Band-Aids, another one's going to be on the Business 60. Where I think you all know that's a pretty busy route for all of us. And when we can't pave a road like Business 60 and we have to put Band-Aids on it, that affects all of our commerce and all of our business. Go ahead, next slide. And then, we have to talk about bridges a little bit. We put a lot of investment into bridges over about the last 15 years. We brought our structurally deficient numbers down. Now they're called poor, not structurally deficient. But we flip-flopped the financial guidance, and now it's going to go 60% roadway, 40% bridge, where it used to be the other way around. So what happens is just, we only have so much money. The investment is less. The number of poor bridges is going to go up. Being the city of bridges, we, 1,800 bridges in just my district alone. That doesn't count the county-owned and city-owned bridges. That's very frightening to some of us. And if you go to the next slide, you can see why I'm saying that. These are some of our major river crossings, major bridges. This is what they look like. Now, the good part, the one in the upper left-hand quarter is actually being worked on this year, but these other ones are not. A picture of the West End Bridge cables. The West End Bridge hasn't been worked on since the late 80s, early 90s. We know what a port and artery that is. The Boulevard of the Allies bridges, we are going to work on them next year, but we can't afford to do everything we need to do. We're about $10 to $15 million short. So we're going to, once again, Band-Aid as much as we can. The bottom right is Fort Duquesne. Fort Duquesne literally has concrete dropping onto the parking lots below. That we know what happens. Fort Duquesne is also a critical link to the city. What you don't see here too is the Fraser Street Bridge is the one in the bottom left with the blocks holding it up. Fraser Street Bridge is on the Parkway East with 100,000 vehicles a day. If anything happens to that bridge would have to be posted for less weight. That is an extremely huge impact. Or if something would happen to it and we would have to suddenly shut down the Parkway East, I think you can all imagine the ramifications to that. Go ahead, next slide. And so not only do we have a lot of the asset problems, what I talked about earlier, that money that we need, that money is just to make our assets in a fair to good condition. That does not address any of our congestion needs. So right now you can see Pittsburgh is the #7 most congested city in the United States, which surprised everybody, even our secretary at the time, that's more congested than Philadelphia. So we did start a few projects. We started to design some projects, on Carnegie ramps, the Green Tree ramps, 79 at 910, 79 near South Point, near Bridgeville. We did a study on the Parkway East to, what can we do? We have some ideas. We have a little bit of design money to start some of these projects, but we don't have any money for any of those projects to move into construction, 0. And those dollars I talked about earlier doesn't include any of the money to do any of those future projects. So not only are we struggling to keep our assets good, we're struggling to keep our roadways and bridges safe. We're trying to manage the growing freight movement, which is wonderful. We love having it, but I don't think our road networks were ever constructed to handle all that additional freight. And then, of course, oh, by the way, we have technology is growing faster than we can keep up with, and we don't have any money set aside to make sure our roads grow with the technology. So those are some of the things we're all trying to balance all of this at one time. Next slide. And like I said, oh, by the way, I was talking about roads, bridges. In our area, we have to set aside quite a bit of money for landslides and floods. These are so impactful to our business. You all know, we've experienced big slides, little slides. Right now, we have about 90 slides going on. I love seeing the sun out. When it starts raining, we'll probably see a dozen or so more, and we just don't have the funding to keep up with them. Some roads are going to stay shut for a very long time. Webster Road in Plum is probably never going to open again. There's some in Beaver County that are probably never going to open again because we just can't afford to invest in them. And then to the right, that's showing Katanning, Pike, and O'Hara and Sharpsburg. Those people cringe every time a drop of rain comes because they literally have a river flying down the road, and we have no money to address that planned or streets run or any of some of the other areas. And I think you all as business leaders know the impact that floods have to the not only business community, but the quality of life of your residents and your customers. So those are just some of the things we're dealing with. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. Because I am extremely proud of the efforts that PennDOT has done, all of our consultants, contractors, Rich, the county, all of our partners in the legislature. We have such an amazing team. And it makes me kind of sad to know how much better we could do if we did have the additional funding. So with that being said, Matt, just a little snapshot of what's going on in our area.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. I'm going to just remind everyone, you can submit questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. But so if you have a question for the panelists, please submit it via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen again. I'm going to sort of pick it up where Cheryl left off, though. Cheryl, can you just describe me? You did a great job of laying out the obviously the state of repair and deferred maintenance issues, but I think it's also really important to recognize that with funding for those deferred maintenance projects and state of repair and addressing those issues, that then frees up investment to do the capacity building, the greater connectivity. Can you talk a little bit about how, particularly on the scale of what the federal government is, in the infrastructure plan talking about, how would that then unlock, your ability to address those deferred maintenance needs, but then also address some of the long-term problems with the bottlenecks you mentioned, and other issues that are more of a long-term nature?
Yeah, right now, as I said, all of the funding that we're getting in the SPC region, almost 100% of it is going to just keep the assets in a good state of good condition. And there's not hardly any money available to do some of these repairs. Our interstates are 60 years old. The interchanges, the acceleration, deceleration lanes, they're very antiquated. They don't meet any standards today. I mentioned truck traffic. Some of our interstates and some of our bridges weren't made for the size of trucks that are happening today. But right now, we don't have any money to invest in any of these interchanges, any of these capacity adding projects, because we're trying to play catch up, just trying to keep the assets good. So if any infusion of money would come. I would hope that a lot federal money tends to focus on maybe the interstates. Maybe some of that money would go towards the repair of the interstates, and then that would maybe free up some of the SPC money to do some of these improvements that would help us from a business perspective, from a safety perspective. As I mentioned, Green Tree and Carnegie, I think a lot of people close their eyes when they try to enter the Parkway, when they're trying to get on at some of these interchanges. We've looked at Squirrel Hill. We have an idea of how to maybe make some repairs to Squirrel Hill to alleviate some of that traffic, but right now, the investment isn't there. So hopefully, with an infusion of money towards maybe asset management, it'll help us address some of these other needs.
Thank you. And with that, going to go to Rich for a question on SPC. As you mentioned, Rich, you're chair of the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, which is our regional MPO, and as I said, a critical voice on infrastructure issues. Can you walk us through a little bit your views on the importance of you mentioned speaking as one region, going to DC and talking to stakeholders down there who we're so well positioned to have in great places like Congressman Lamb and Congressman Doyle, the importance of speaking with one voice and what you're hearing from your fellow county leaders who join you in the SPC effort.
Yeah, Matt, it's a good question because we do talk about this all the time. There really is a need, obviously, for transportation and connectivity. And in many of these communities where the residents are living, but a lot of the job opportunities, happen to be in what we call the Innovation District in downtown Pittsburgh, Oakland, the Strip District, Lawrenceville, places that are starting to really take off. But the connectivity through broadband is something I hear again and again from people like Commissioner Hess in Indiana County and others. It's just Commissioner Oshie in Butler County. To talk about how do we connect people and how do we get folks to these various places. So we do need to speak as a region. We've got in that 10 county region, we've got in essence 6 congressional leaders. I represent Doyle and Lamb, but we've got Kelly and Reschenthaler and Thompson and Joyce that also represents part of those areas as well. Obviously in the House and the Senate in Harrisburg, you've got people like Leader Ward and Leader Costa, 2 of the leaders of the various Senate caucuses. People like Representative Davis who are in leadership. Whip Oberlander up in Clarion and Armstrong County. So we've got some folks in positions of leadership in all the caucuses, in both chambers, throughout the partners that we need. And I think we'll be able to speak with one voice on the needs of where we are, the investments we want to see. I think the challenge is going to be, how do we pay for it? Are some of those representatives really willing to put up the votes that are going to be needed, like we did with Act 89 a decade or so ago, when Governor Corbett led a team to get that funding passed. It's coming to an end. It's expiring and sunsetting pretty soon. So we've got to renew that, and we've got to come together. And Austin Davis said this very well. We're going to need the business community's voice in a loud way. To be able to say, look, we need these investments if we're going to grow, if we're going to provide opportunities for folks, and it's really going to be our challenge.
Thank you. I think that's a great pivot to Representative Davis. And, both you and the county executive mentioned the importance of the East Busway extension in connecting folks to opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that project specifically, and then also this funding cliff that we're headed for, that was really a creation of Act 89 and how it was structured, and the importance of addressing that funding cliff, particularly vis-a-vis public transportation?
Yeah, so sorry, the extension of the Martin Luther King Busway is critical because as we, one of the main challenges in the Mon Valley is that it's difficult to get to logistically. From my office in downtown McKeesport, it could take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to get to downtown Pittsburgh, and it's literally 10 miles away. And as we see younger people younger people in communities that are thriving, there is a significant mass transit presence, and younger people are gravitating more towards mass transit than driving individual automobiles. So the extension of the Martin Luther King Busway would help revitalize many communities that have quite frankly been left behind from the economic development process. But it also would open up new windows of opportunity for business expansion, for growth. And it's not just a project, I think, that would positively impact the Mon Valley. It would positively impact the eastern suburban region of Allegheny County. If you look at some of the things some of the things that are going on in Monroeville, as we see shopping malls continue to decline and decay, you're starting to see communities that are hollowing out. And part of that is because people just can't get there. We have some of the most affordable housing stock in the region. But when you compare that with your commute times or the location or the difficulty in accessing the downtown or Oakland, which are two major job centers in this region, people often make the choice to be closer where it's more convenient. As it relates to our transportation options, the county executive made a really good point that it's going to take elected officials willing to make hard votes. These funding cliffs that we're facing, quite frankly, were the result of elected officials in the General Assembly not being willing to make tough votes, but to tying transportation funding to the turnpike, which everyone knew from the beginning was an unsustainable model. But it's really going to take leadership at the state level to stand up and say, hey, look, we need to vote for these investments, because while it may be a political difficult vote to raise anybody's taxes or to raise revenue, it's something that's going to help in the long term. And the reality is people elect their leaders to make difficult decisions. Not every decision we make is going to be popular. Not everybody's going to like it, but we're charged with making decisions in the best interest of our Commonwealth. And so, we really need to, this fall when we go back, really need to dive in and deal with these issues, because I believe if we don't deal with these issues this year, next year is going to be extremely more difficult to deal with them because it's an election year. So I think we need to deal with these issues this year, try to get some stability, get investment, particularly if Congress passes a transportation bill. We're going to know how we can play into that and what we can do to enhance what they're already passing. So I think it's going to take some leadership. But I think if stakeholders like the business community are raising their voices and are saying we need this investment, I think that gives energy to the elected officials to ultimately do the right thing for our Commonwealth.
Thank you, Representative Davis. We have a question for Cheryl. A great question. Have you done or are you planning to do an analysis as to how transportation usage and patterns have changed and may change as a result of the pandemic, which could lead to more efficient allocation of the limited funding resources at hand?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's one that we haven't quite wrapped our arms around yet. We're still trying to figure out, and I hate to use this terminology that everybody's used, what the new normal is going to look like. Our traffic isn't quite back. We're probably at 85%, 90% depending upon the day, but our peaks have changed. So with our peak traffic not occurring in the same times that it always has been in the morning and evening, we've seen different types of traffic patterns. So we're trying to work through how do you handle them. We still haven't opened up the HOV lanes because of that reason. It's very costly for us to keep the HOV lanes open. So we've been discussing, do we do a study of how we might utilize the HOV lanes in a different fashion? I'm sure there's as we get kind of slowly, and I know the representative is hopeful, as am I, that we slowly get back to business as what we might want to call it. We'll see how the traffic patterns might change, and there may be things we look at a little bit differently. We're just still on the cusp of that right now. Give us a little bit of time to digest what's going on and where the patterns might be changing. And I'll probably have a different answer if we talk in about 6 months.
Thank you very much for that. We've had a couple of questions related to two really critical areas: transportation, electrification, electric vehicles, as well as the importance of investing in our locks and dams and waterways, both for the movement of goods and commodities and commerce, as well as for the ability to have drinking water and recreation. Rich, I'm gonna throw both of those over to you. I know, we've talked about the idea of transportation electrification, how our region is positioned to succeed there, as well as waterways investment. Can you just touch on those two topics? I know unrelated, but from your vantage point, those two really important topics.
Yes, and yes, the transit system, for example, much more electrification is going to happen, particularly on the BRT project with electric vehicles. Moving, maybe as much as a third of our population will be using that. I will tell you again, the Biden administration and Secretary Buttigieg were very excited about that project. That project's already on the books, ready to go. It's moving forward, and I think that might be one of the projects they want to come and highlight. We're excited about the fact that Wabtec, one of our local companies, now a worldwide conglomerate headquartered here, is moving forward with electrification of delivering goods on rail. We know the energy efficiency and the the lessening of our carbon footprint when it comes to using rail as opposed to our interstate system on moving materials. Also the safety aspect. We haven't touched on this as much, but 22 times safer to move our heavy materials along rail as we do on our highway system. So these things are really, really important. But I think you're going to see much more dealing with the electrification and dealing with climate issues. The president has put out his plan about becoming net zero by 2035 and be totally off of fossil fuels by 2050. And I think this region is poised to be able to do that. We announced a hydro plan where we're going to be generating all of our power for county government, our buildings, our jail, our nursing homes, the canes, et cetera, our parks, using our rivers as generating the electricity to turn that turbine and not be burning fossil fuels to do that. Matt, you mentioned the solar panels that are going to be used to power a significant portion of our airport and all the work that goes on out there. But locks and dams are also so critical. I know Congressman Lamb has spent a lot of time with the Montgomery and the Beaver County lock and dam as the Shell plant comes online and manufacturing with respect to the plastics industry. That $7 billion investment that's happening in Beaver County is going to also unlock a whole lot of manufacturing opportunities for us in this region. So again, there's so many different areas that we can go that can improve jobs and opportunities for folks here. And in those investments, President Biden has said 80% of the work that's going to be done, putting our building trades and construction folks to work, you don't need a college degree to have those jobs. So you don't have to be a software engineer coming out of Carnegie Mellon University. This puts people to work in all of our communities, particularly some neighborhoods and communities that haven't had those opportunities in the past.
Thank you very much, Rich. And Austin, Representative Davis, just want to pivot over to you for a second on, in your role at the Port Authority. We have a question that I think, it goes to the connectivity between the importance of deferred maintenance and sort of what's staring us right in the face and our ability to add capacity and really shoot big in this space. And it's a question related to the importance of addressing the backlog at the Port Authority of repair, of maintenance, bus, light rail, even garage construction, and addressing those issues that then allows the Port Authority to pivot to added capacity. The Martin Luther King Busway, Rich has mentioned BRT, projects like that. Can you talk a little bit about that connection?
Yeah, it's critical. And one of the things that has been in the news recently is that the Port Authority needs to replace some of the cars on the T line, which is a very expensive replacement project. But it's critical that we take care of those investments, because that's the foundation from which all the other growth is going to happen. So we can't put off or defer maintenance or upgrades that we need to sustain what is today's system, because then we can't build tomorrow's system. I think that this transportation infrastructure bill can help us meet some of those goals potentially. But the questioner is certainly right, and I think that the Post-Gazette did a editorial maybe this past week talking about how we have to think big, but we also can't defer maintenance or put off the some of the bigger cost items that quite frankly aren't the sexiest projects that people are going to see. But it, you know, as you can see from what Cheryl's presentation gave, you see what happens when we put off dealing with our foundation issues, and the Port Authority is no different. If we're not replacing buses, if we're not replacing T cars, if we're not maintaining the system that we have, then we're ultimately setting ourselves up for failure in terms of growth. So we're going to have to address those critical infrastructure needs.
Thank you very much. I know we got one question on the timeline of the movement of a federal bill. I mean, I can sort of address that a little bit and then just open it up for any of the panelists. I know, you know, we had a conversation this week that our boards with Congressman Lamb that he was kind enough to set up with Chairman DeFazio, and you know, this is going to move very quickly. The earmark process has started. You know, the community project funding, I should say, process has started in April and is really ramping up. And Chairman DeFazio told us that they want to move a bill out of the T&I committee, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee in the House, somewhere around mid-May, and that was reported. And so this is going to move very swiftly, and that's why we think, you know, having conversations like this with stakeholders like the individuals we're talking to right now is so critical right now to position the region. But you know, any of the panelists want to take the question related to time frame?
Yeah, no, Matt, I think you laid it out pretty well. I think it'll move in the House fairly not easily, but it'll move more smoothly than it will in the Senate. So, I mean, the president has laid out a timeline of this summer. He would like to see it pass. He was pretty good with his the ARP predictions that he made. He got it done in a timely manner. I think there's some key people in the Senate. Obviously, Senator Casey be a key driver in this, our senator, but also our neighbor to the south, Senator Manchin. I think will have a lot of input in where this goes, because the funding part of it is going to be the challenge. You know, the president has laid out a plan that nobody's going to pay more, that makes less than $400,000 a year will pay. There's talk about, you know, increasing the corporate tax, which was at 35%, went down to 21%. President's talking about putting it at 28%. I think Senator Manchin's mentioned he would go to 25%. I think that negotiation will occur, and you're going to see, you know, it'll be like a little bit of a roller coaster. There'll be days when it looks very, very positive, and then there's going to be days when it'll be pessimistic. But I'm hoping this summer that they get moving so that, you know, by the fall, a lot of this money starts to come in, that these projects can start to flow. Many of the ones that Cheryl has laid out and showed us that are imminent and need to be done.
Thank you.
Hey, sorry, Matt, just to piggyback on that just a little bit. I think this goes back to why your voices are going to be so critical, particularly not just in the House, but in the United States Senate with Senator Toomey and Senator Casey, as well as our surrounding senators for the businesses that have a little bit of a larger reach. You know, I agree with the county executive. I think they want to get this done as quickly as they can, but if there are going to be any roadblocks that are brought up, it's most likely going to be in the United States Senate. And elevating your voice really will kind of grease the skid, so to speak. If you're hearing from large scale businesses in your state or in your region, it has a powerful impact. I know if I meet with a business as an elected official from the Pittsburgh region or the Mon Valley, and they have a strong position, I seriously take that into consideration, and I believe the senators will too.
Thank you both for that. The next question, I think, for the county exec, because this really sort of touches on a lot of what you've talked about in sort of the broad definition of infrastructure. And the question is, can you talk about the expansive definition of infrastructure, including pipes and pumps, human infrastructure. You and Representative Davis in particular have talked about workforce development as an example of something that's critically important. And the questioner asked about broadband as well.
Yeah, one of the things that the president has laid out is that infrastructure includes social human infrastructure, meaning getting people ready for work, getting people ready for getting the skills that they need to move forward. He's also even talking about childcare to unlock for families that often have to make very difficult choices whether to go to work or pay for childcare. So there's a lot, we used to obviously think of infrastructure as roads, bridges, transit, water lines. Broadband wasn't in the conversation until very recently. But when you look at our history going way back, the railroad infrastructure, over a century ago, and then the electrification in the 30s when Roosevelt, connected rural communities that didn't have electricity. That was a huge infrastructure bill that we did. And then, of course, President Eisenhower in the 50s, the interstate highway system, again, that connected people that weren't, living in these densely urban areas with jobs. And now we, again, have a lot of the same challenges, but it's on IT and it's on opportunities. So I just think, again, there's a lot of support. When you talk to folks in rural communities on both sides of the aisle, they acknowledge that there is a need for the things that need to be done. The question becomes as Austin Davis said, how do you pay for it? And we are going to need folks in Harrisburg to come up. The governor has challenged people. By August 1st, he'd like to see a plan put forth. President Biden has put his plan forth. So it's now up to all of us as community leaders to get behind these folks in making these difficult votes. I was very glad to see that the largest corporation, Amazon, came out in favor of raising the corporate tax. Jeff Bezos came out for that. Lyft came out for that, a transportation company. So you're seeing corporate America also getting behind the fact that we need to somehow make these investments, and we hope that can happen.
Thanks, Rich. I know we're bumping up against our time. Oh, go ahead, Rep.
Sorry, Matt. Just as Rich was ending on investment, I just wanted to make a point that I think is really important for the business community as it relates to public transit. For every $1 we invest, there's a $4 return on investment. For every $1 we invest in our public transit system, there's a $4 return on investment. So the investments that we're talking about have a real world economic return on the businesses and the economy that we see in our region.
Absolutely, and we recognize this infrastructure investment is long overdue, and we certainly want to be part of the conversation, around the pay-fors and engaged in that process. We may not agree with everything in the president's plan, but we want to be part of the process. This is long overdue and certainly necessary. And we think there's, as the county exec said, lots of room as this ball bounces down the hill for negotiations and real discussions. And when we get to the substance of the issue here around the pay for, so we really want to be part of that process. We're bumping up against our time. We have several questions that we weren't able to get to here today. We sort of joked around before we started the panel that we may need a part 2 with the three of you. And so, hopefully we could maybe set that up in the near future. I'm just going to do a quick round robin, if you will, for closing remarks with, maybe Cheryl starting off.
Thanks, Matt. I can wrap up real quickly. There's a couple questions here I just wanted to touch on and make sure. You spoke of the Transportation Revenue Options Committee that the county executive is on, and I'm also working, being part of indirectly. That is actually going to address some of the questions that are being asked regarding electric vehicles, how we're going to morph away from the gas tax. So that committee is active right now. Or as Rich mentioned, we have to get something back to the governor very shortly. So we don't have the answer to those questions now, and a lot of folks are working very hard to come up with other alternatives. It's not easy. There's only so many places you can get money from, and so they're working through that. So that is being looked at. And the other things folks were asking about, how can you have a voice in any of these decisions? There's always SPC, the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, begs for folks to be part of the planning process. They're always looking very, it's various steps along the way. All of our projects have public comment, the long range plan, the TIP's going to be starting. All of these have public comment opportunities, as is the state actually has right now, their long range plans being reviewed. There's always opportunities. I can get links to you, Matt, and you can share them with the members to make sure that their voices are heard as we make some of these very difficult transportation decisions. So I just wanted to close up with that. Thank you both. Thank you for your time, and County Executive and Representative. It's always a pleasure being with you, even if it's virtual.
Thanks, Cheryl. Go to Representative Davis next.
Well, first, I just want to thank you, Matt, and to the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce for having us today and for facilitating what I think was a wonderful discussion. Thank you to County Executive Fitzgerald for the work that you're doing leading our region. It's great to have such a strong partner in the county courthouse. And to Cheryl Moon Sirianni for the great work that you're doing in PennDOT. And I look forward to working closely with you over the next year. We have some significant challenges, but there's also significant opportunities. Pittsburgh and Allegheny County had a strong economy prior to the pandemic. And I think with the American Rescue package that the president and Congressman Doyle and Lamb put through, combined with this transportation and infrastructure legislation that we talked about today, we're going to be really primed for a great comeback and to potentially catapult us into a different category of American cities. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for participating and adding your voices to the discussion, because they're going to be critical as we go forward. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, Representative. County Executive, you want to close us out?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, everybody. What a huge turnout today of participation, even in Zoom. I agree with Cheryl. You know, great to have this technology, but maybe in the next one or a couple months from now, we can all get in together in person, because I think it really is those conversations, some sidebar conversations that really give us some of the good ideas that we need. And I think, you know, while we love the technology that allows us to do this, it isn't a substitute for the in-person stuff that we've been able to do. The First Friday things, Matt, you and your team done these for a number of years. I think they're really impactful and they're really great. I won't speak for my fellow panelists, but I'll be glad to come back, you know, whenever. This is a conversation that's going to continue at the state level in our capital in Harrisburg, and at our federal level in Washington, to continue to push forward to make these investments that we all know we need. So let's continue this conversation. Let's take the best ideas and let's move forward as a region.
Thank you very much. And just one more time, thank you to the County Executive and Cheryl and Representative Davis for joining us. And we will continue the conversation. Would love to have all three of you back. And as we said, for a part 2, we could probably do part 3, part 4, and part 5 with the three of you as well. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Comcast, and thank you to all of you who joined us today. So we'll see you next month. Thanks.